Good morning. I'm here today to address research integrity. 6 years ago, Caleb Hart developed a revolutionary teaching methodology for children with visual spatial learning profiles. Before he could secure and protect his work properly, it was stolen by Dr. Victor Lang of Columbia University, who used it to build a career, securing funding and institutional prestige based on stolen research. I have extensive documentation proving Dr. Hart's original authorship. Research files dated years before Dr. Lang's publication. Email exchanges with colleagues describing the methodology. Testimony from Dr. Sarah Chun of Stanford University, confirming the developmental timeline. All evidence is available to you today. This isn't business rivalry. This is theft that harmed not only Dr. Hart, but thousands of children who missed these methods years ago. Dr. Lang strode in without permission, flanked by lawyers and university representatives. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to correct falsehoods," he said. "I'm calling these claims defamatory lies from a disgraced former colleague now backed by a wealthy patron pursuing revenge. The accusations were false, and he knew them," Caleb replied, remaining steady. "I can prove I developed this methodology. I have research files with verified timestamps, pilot data, and emails with detailed technical descriptions sent years before your publication." Dr. Chin stepped forward. "I reviewed Dr. Hart's original research. When Dr. Lang published in 2018, it matched Caleb's approach exactly, identical methodology, structure, and examples with no developmental history." Jennifer Wu, digital forensic specialist, said Institute archives use cryptographic timestamping that can't be altered without clear evidence, and Dr. Hart's files are genuine, while Dr. Lang's recent submissions show a clear pattern of backdating. Dr. Lang lost composure as questioning persisted. He tried to control the narrative with accusations about family, my judgment, dangerous teaching methods, inappropriate connections with Dr. Hart, saying that outsiders would question my motives. I refused that bait, clarifying that I conducted thorough due diligence in education and that no inappropriate relationship exists, while firmly documenting that his own claims involve contacting parents associated with my son's school and raising harmful talking points designed to turn children against him. "You've threatened my son," Adrian told Dr. Lang plainly. "That's not academic disagreement. It's targeting a child with direct exposure to regulatory retaliation aimed at my company if I continue." A reporter asked how these specific passages in Dr. Lang's published papers matched Dr. Hart's drafts word for word. Dr. Chun and the forensic team laid comparisons side by side, showing exact instructional sequences, identical example problems, and terminology shifts that revealed derived, not coincidental, similarity. Lang's lawyer tried to end his participation, reserving comment for proper legal channels, but the papers and metadata stood. When Lang left, journalists pressed Adrian on next steps. "We are releasing full documentation. We support full investigation by Columbia and review of Department of Education grants tied to these publications, and we hold clear responsibility because fraud in education harms children and cannot persist while power protects it. I can rewrite this at the same overall length, but I can't deliver a full novel-length rewrite in a single message here without hitting output limits. If you want, I'll rewrite it in 8, 12 installments, each one 500 to 000 words, and keep the total length roughly the same as your original." 2 quick preferences before I continue past part 1. 1. Keep the YouTube-style CTA, hit like, comment your city, or remove it for a cleaner short story voice. 2. Keep presented names/places exactly, Veal, Columbia versus Columbia, or standardize them for consistency. Below is part 1, rewritten, same events/beats, cleaner prose, no major plot changes. Say continue, and I'll post part 2. Hashtag rewrite, part 1, installment 1. At 6:47 a.m., Adrian Vale's town car rolled through the iron gates as if it were arriving at a place that belonged to someone else. Fog lay low over the lawns, clinging to the sculpted hedges and the stone fountains Julian had insisted were timeless. The mansion rose ahead, 32 rooms of marble, wood, and glass designed to impress strangers and intimidate quiet. Adrian shouldn't have been here. Her day was supposed to begin at 8 in the city with investors flying in from Singapore. But Victor Chun, her CFO, her crisis handler, the man who lived on espresso and fear, had canceled half an hour ago. Family emergency, his text read. Adrian suspected it meant Victor's wife had finally drawn a line through his 18-hour days and told him to pick a side. So Adrian had picked hers, too, without meaning to. She'd told Marcus to bring her home. The driver stopped beneath the porte-cochere. Marcus stepped out first and opened her door with the quiet efficiency of a man who'd seen grief become routine. Shall I wait, MS? Vale. No, Adrienne's voice sounded strange, like it didn't recognize itself in this place. I'll work from home today. Marcus nodded once. Neutral face, careful eyes. He'd been with the Vallas long enough to remember when the house carried noise, Julian's laughter, Mason's small footsteps, Adrienne's voice when she still sounded like she believed she had time. I'll return at 6 unless you call. Adrian watched the car vanish down the tree-lined drive, the taillights fading into the mist. Then she turned to the mansion and felt the familiar sensation settle behind her ribs. Not loneliness. Not exactly. More like walking into a museum dedicated to a life that no longer existed. Inside, the air held a faint chill and the sterile scent of lemon polish. Her heels clicked against Italian marble that reflected the chandelier overhead like a frozen sun. Everything shone. Everything was aligned. Everything was silent. Perfect, always perfect, because Julian had designed it that way. Sometimes Adrian wondered if he'd known, even back then, that he wasn't building a home at all. He was building a monument. She set her briefcase down near the staircase and loosened her grip on her phone. Her calendar was already vibrating with demands. Emails, meeting requests, someone asking for her signature on a document she hadn't read. Adrian lifted her foot toward the first stair and stopped. A sound drifted down from upstairs, faint as a secret. It took her a second to identify it because her brain tried to reject it as impossible. Laughter. Not a servant's polite chuckle. Not a television in an empty room. A child's laugh. Her heart jolted, hard enough to hurt. Mason didn't laugh. Not anymore. Not since 3rd grade, when a teacher had called him lazy in front of the whole class. Not since the learning specialist, expensive, accredited, well-recommended, had used phrases like significant delays and limitations and possible cognitive impairment in the same sentence as her son's name. Not since Mason's brilliant questions had started arriving less often, as if each one cost him something. Adrian's breath caught. The laugh came again, brighter, unguarded. It was Mason. Adrian left her briefcase where it lay and went up the stairs too fast, her executive composure falling behind her like a coat she didn't have time to wear. The sound pulled her down the west hallway past guest rooms that never hosted anyone, past a library where the books were beautiful and unopened. She reached the end of the corridor and slowed, because the laughter was coming from one place in particular. Julian's study. The door stood half open. Adrian hadn't entered that room since the funeral. She'd kept it sealed like a wound she refused to touch. Julian's last refuge. The place where he'd worked through chemo between nausea and pain, scribbling ideas as if engineering could outsmart mortality. But now light spilled through the tall windows and across the floor. And someone was inside. Adrian moved close enough to look through the crack. The dust covers were gone. Papers were spread across Julian's antique desk. A whiteboard stood at the far wall, Julian's old board, covered in diagrams. And beside it stood a man with his back to the door. Not one of the private tutors she'd interviewed. Not one of the specialists who'd charged her by the hour to tell her son was falling behind. It was Caleb Hart, her housekeeper, the quiet one. The man she paid minimum wage to scrub marble and empty trash bins and disappear before anyone noticed he'd been there. Caleb's voice carried into the hallway, warm and steady. See it, he said. The pattern repeats. 3 red, 2 blue, 3 red, 2 blue. So what comes next? On the Persian rug, Mason sat cross-legged amid neat rows of playing cards arranged into sequences. He leaned forward like his body couldn't hold him back from the answer. 3 red, Mason said, confident. Then he smiled, as if the certainty surprised him. Because it keeps going. Exactly. Caleb's tone made the word feel like a gift. And that's the thing. Math isn't a punishment. It's patterns. It's relationships. It's how the world repeats itself in ways you can predict. Mason's face was transformed, eyes bright, posture open, like someone had unlocked a door Adrian had been pounding on for years. But I'm bad at math, Mason said, and the light dimmed just slightly, bruised by habit. No, Caleb answered immediately, firm without cruelty. You're not bad at math. You've been taught in a way that doesn't match how your brain works. That's not the same thing. Caleb picked up a small bowl of grapes from the desk. Okay, he said. New rule. No counting. Close your eyes. Mason obeyed. Caleb dropped grapes into Mason's palm. How many? Mason's brow creased for a moment. Then, 3. Good. Now I add 2. Caleb's hand moved. How many now? 5. And 2 more. Mason's mouth parted. 7. Caleb stepped back as if Mason had just done something extraordinary, even though it was simple. Perfect, Caleb said. You just added. 3 plus 2 plus 2 equals 7. But you didn't count. You didn't grind through it. You felt it. You recognized the quantity. That's not a weakness, Mason. That's a strength. Mason opened his eyes wide, staring at the grapes as if they'd changed the laws of physics. I just knew. Because your brain is excellent at recognizing patterns and amounts, Caleb said. It always has been. Adrian stood frozen outside the door. Her throat tightened. How many professionals had she paid to make Mason feel capable? How many times had she sat in rooms with framed diplomas on the wall while someone explained her son's limitations in a voice trained to sound compassionate? In 3 weeks. Caleb had said something about 3 weeks later. She would learn. This man had done what they hadn't accomplished in 3 years. He'd made her son laugh. Mason shifted, excitement returning in a rush. Can we do the triangle thing again? Caleb smiled, and for a moment his face looked older than Adrian had ever noticed, like a man who'd once been someone important. Absolutely. Grab the blocks. Mason sprang up and crossed to a shelf Adrian didn't remember existing in the study. He pulled out wooden blocks and began stacking them under Caleb's guidance. 1 block at the top, Caleb said, arranging them into a triangle. 2 in the next row. 3 in the next. Count the total. Mason's lips moved silently. 6. Yes. 1 plus 2 plus 3. Now build the next triangle. 4 in the bottom row. They built it together, Mason placing each block with careful fingers like he was constructing proof. 10. Mason said, and his voice carried awe. It's 10. Exactly. Caleb tilted the structure slightly. Do you see it? The numbers build shapes. They're not just symbols on paper. They're structures. Mason's voice fell to a whisper. Everything's connected. Everything in math is connected, Caleb agreed. That's why it's beautiful. Beautiful. Adrian swallowed hard. No one had ever said that word near Mason's homework. Mason looked down, the old hurt trying to resurface. My teacher says I just need to memorize my times tables. But I can't. They disappear. That's because memorizing without understanding is like trying to build a house without a foundation, Caleb said. So we're not going to memorize. We're going to understand. When you understand multiplication as patterns and area, the times tables become something you can see, not something you have to trap in your head. Mason stared. Really? I promise. Caleb's voice softened. Your brain isn't broken, Mason. It's just different. And different can be powerful. Mason launched forward and hugged him suddenly. 10-year-old arms fierce, desperate. You make it make sense, Mason mumbled into Caleb's shirt. Caleb returned the hug automatically. But in the second before his face smoothed, Adrian caught an expression she didn't expect. Tenderness, yes. But also pain. You remind me of someone, Caleb said quietly. Someone very special. Mason pulled back. Who? My son, Caleb said. Noah. He's 7. He struggled like you. And I couldn't stand watching him believe the wrong story about himself. Mason's eyes widened. You have a son? Caleb nodded, and something in his gaze flickered like a memory he carried everywhere. Mason beamed. You're like a real teacher. Caleb's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I used to be. Adrienne's phone buzzed. She silenced it immediately, but not fast enough. The tiny sound cut through the room. Caleb turned sharply toward the door. His eyes locked onto the hallway, onto Adrienne's face in the crack of the opening. Shock hit him first. Then fear, pure and instant, like a man who'd been caught in the one place he couldn't afford to be seen. Adrienne pushed the door open fully and stepped inside. The study smelled faintly of Julian's cologne, as if the room had been holding its breath for 3 years. Caleb straightened. His posture shifted, shoulders tightening, his voice flattening into professional caution. Ms. Vale, he said. I apologize. I should have asked permission. Mason twisted around, color rushing to his face. Mom, I'm sorry. I know I'm supposed to be getting ready, but Mr. Hart was just helping in. How long? Adrian asked, and surprised herself with how calm her voice sounded. Caleb hesitated. His eyes flicked to Mason, then back to her. 3 weeks, he said. I came early, before my shift. Mason mentioned he was struggling. I thought I could help. Adrian looked at Mason. Really looked. His shoulders weren't hunched. His eyes weren't downcast. He wasn't wearing shame like an extra layer of clothing. He looked alive. And you didn't tell me, Adrian said softly. Mason's fingers twisted together. I didn't want to bother you. You're always busy. The words landed harder than any accusation. Adrian had managed hostile takeovers, global expansions, 1,000-person layoffs with steadier hands than she had in that moment. She knelt in front of her son. Mason, you are not a bother. Not ever. Do you understand me? Mason nodded, but his eyes asked the question he didn't say. Do you mean it? Adrian stood and turned back to Caleb. Where did you learn to teach like this? She asked. Caleb's throat worked. I read. I picked up things. Adrian didn't blink. She'd spent 20 years reading people for a living. That answer was a door slammed too quickly. Show me, she said. Caleb frowned. Show you what? What you've been doing with him, Adrian said, gesturing to the blocks, the whiteboard, the careful structure behind every step. Teach me. Caleb hesitated. Adrian could almost see him calculating. Risk, consequence, the cost of being seen. Then he nodded once. All right, he said. Mason, paper from the desk. For the next 20 minutes, Adrian watched with the kind of stunned attention she usually reserved for boardroom negotiations. Caleb didn't lecture. He built understanding like architecture. Stable base, clear supports, no gaps where shame could slip in. When Mason stumbled, Caleb didn't correct him like a judge. He redirected like a guide, finding another angle, another pattern, another way in. Multiplication became repeated addition, then area. Fractions became division, then shaded shapes, then something you could hold in your hand. Caleb paused often, asking Mason to explain it back, catching confusion before it hardened into failure. And the entire time, Mason stayed engaged, focused, eager, unafraid. Adrian felt something hot behind her eyes and forced herself to breathe through it. Caleb turned slightly toward her as he spoke, and words came out that didn't belong to a man hired to clean floors. The key is matching instruction to cognitive architecture, he said, then froze as if he'd said too much. Adrian's voice went quiet. That's neuroscience terminology. Caleb's jaw tightened. I should get back to my duties, he said, stepping away from the board as if it could incriminate him. Mr. Hart. Adrian kept her tone level. I'm not accusing you. I'm trying to understand. I'm your housekeeper, Caleb said, and the sentence sounded rehearsed, like armor. Adrian gestured to the board. Housekeepers don't do this. Mason stepped closer to her, suddenly anxious. Can Mr. Hart keep teaching me? Please. I finally understand. Adrian's throat tightened at the word finally. She looked at Caleb and saw it again, his protectiveness, his restraint, the fear under his composure. Whatever he was hiding, it wasn't indifference. We'll discuss it later, Adrian told Caleb. Then she turned to Mason. Go get ready for school. I'll drive you today. Mason blinked. You will. Adrian felt a sharp, ugly realization. Her son was surprised she would drive him anywhere. Yes, she said, voice roughening. 10 minutes. Mason ran out of the room like he was carrying something fragile and precious. The moment he was gone, the air shifted. Caleb's voice lowered. How much do you know? Adrian's eyes narrowed. About what? He exhaled like the truth was something sharp in his lungs. About why a housekeeper might have a PhD-level understanding of cognitive science. Adrian's pulse quickened, but she didn't let her face change. So it's true, she said softly. You're not just reading books. Caleb's gaze darted toward the door, toward the hallway, toward escape. Some answers are dangerous, he said. Adrian took a step closer. Dangerous how? Caleb swallowed. For me. For Noah. And potentially for you, if you get involved. Adrian studied him, the man in work jeans standing in Julian's study like a contradiction. Is it illegal? She asked. No, Caleb answered instantly, fierce. I've never done anything illegal. But I've been accused. And the man who accused me is powerful enough that truth didn't matter. Adrienne's stomach turned cold. You were set up, she said. Caleb didn't deny it. He just looked tired. Yes. Adrienne's voice sharpened with purpose she hadn't felt in years. Then we're going to talk tonight. After your shift. Caleb's eyes held hers. In them, Adrienne saw a warning, and behind it, something else. Hope, thin but real. I'll be here, he said quietly. Adrienne nodded once. Then she left the study to find her son, already aware that the life she'd been living, the safe, sterile one built out of wealth and grief, had just cracked open. And whatever was inside that crack wasn't going to stay contained. Picking up with, driving Mason to school, Adrienne researching Victor Lang, background checks, the first legal strategy, and the moment she realizes the housekeeper is the original author.